Hi, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Let's Talk ICT. Today's session is the first of a two-part series. This is on creating an accessible PDF. And we chose this series specifically because document accessibility is crucial, but also a lot of our agencies use PDFs and share them on their websites. And so knowing how to create one and also how to fix one that's in existence are skills that we can all use. So we've called on our two experts across the state to lead these sessions. Today's session, we are excited to have Lainey Strange. She is the web accessibility expert through yes, you are. Through Information Technology Service Division for the state of Missouri, and just an all-around terrific gal. So I want to introduce you guys to Lainey, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
All right. Hi, everybody. I thought I'd just do a little video. Hi to everybody before we pop back to our presentation. Thank you for everybody that's popping on for this session. Okay. All right. So good morning. Welcome. Sounds like we've got, depending upon where you're at, we've got some different weather going on. It's raining and thundering in Kansas City, apparently. I think the weather is pretty decent in central Missouri. So I want to thank Missouri Assistive Technology for inviting me to do this presentation. I've worked with Eileen on many things, including other trainings, in-person trainings, and different things over time. So thank you for that opportunity. Like she said, this is a session one in a two-part series. The session two is in the chat. So if you haven't had an opportunity to sign up for that one, go ahead. And I also kind of like to think of this as a next step after, let's say, doing a word accessibility session, because it's always best to make your source documents accessible. And that's where you're going to have the most success. Obviously, there's going to be things that come up where trainings like today and the next one are going to be very, very helpful to you. But if you can get as much done in those early stages of developing a document, that is your best bet. I also popped in the recording that Eileen did. I'm thinking it was December, Eileen. And that is recorded and available in the Missouri Assistive Technology YouTube channel. So you may find that that one is especially helpful as well as you're listening to this. And if you haven't had an opportunity to watch a training on setting up good source documents, and I'll reference that statement as I'm talking as well. And then, like she said, this will be recorded, so we will have this available for later on. As far as questions go, I have a couple of spots later in the presentation that will open up for questions. But you're more than welcome to pop those into the chat whenever you're thinking of them, and then we'll address the questions later on in the session. So here we go. Okay, so on the agenda for today, we'll be covering things like, why would you even be converting to PDF in the first place? The common ways that PDFs are created and some of the situations that arise depending upon how the PDF was created, what features in a PDF make it accessible. And another important aspect of creating a PDF is that moment that you convert it, that you do it the right way. And then there's kind of a do's and don'ts when converting. I mentioned here Microsoft Office But the concepts work across several other platforms, into some, InDesign, some other various products as well. Even getting into Google platform, etc., you can convert accessible PDFs out of there as well. And then I'll just give you an introductory on Acrobat 101. We'll be going into Adobe Acrobat, and in this case, we're going to be going into DC, which is their latest subscription model. Several of the things that I do here will be similar if you're using a slightly older version of Acrobat Pro, but we will be using DC for this. And just some things to think about, setting up, kind of optimizing Acrobat to use certain features of it that may not be set up in a default setup for you. And then we'll just actually go into a PDF document, and we're going to be talking about reading order and the tag tree, which we'll be getting into that. And we aren't going to be diving too much into details of remediating a PDF document. That will be more in series 2. I'll do a couple of things in this kind of as an introductory, but then you'll get more into that in session 2. So, okay. Why would you convert to PDF? Many of you probably have realized that, just a second. Many of you probably have realized that you think about documents that have a certain format. Think like forms, a manual, annual report, different things like that you're wanting it to retain its format, that just don't lend themselves really well to, being a web page, etc. It may be things that you want to make it printer friendly, things like that. That's one of the reasons why you would be wanting to use that kind of format. Also, if you're going to use another format, PDF is very widely adopted across different operating systems. You don't have to worry about, if you have another, software file, software application, is it gonna work correctly on a Mac, or is that software even available on a Mac, or all those kind of things. And related to that, they're very portable and mobile. So a PDF document is easy to pull up on a mobile device. Some cases with other types of file formats, other than web pages, that may not be the case. Many times too, and this is probably more so the case than any other, the file sizes typically become smaller, and PDF, Adobe Acrobat, does a really good job at reducing that file size, which, when you're, especially if you're pulling something up on a mobile device, and you're just using your data, that's really helpful. It's going to pop up a little bit quicker. And, those are some examples of some benefits. Obviously, natively, when you're creating your content, web pages are always the best way to go, because they are the easiest for people to consume. But in situations like you're seeing here, these are examples why you would be using them. Common ways PDFs are created. So this is just some examples of, what sources may create a PDF, and maybe what roadblocks may occur, or in some cases, what's the better way to go? What are situations where a PDF is created, and you may very well need to be looking at what you're going to be learning in this training. So first off, auto-generated PDF documents from a web application. So think about, you go in and log into your credit card account, and you can download a statement. Those are generated automatically. A bank statement download, etc. So those kind of companies need to think about that, because that plugin needs to create an accessible PDF document. And I know in my work doing accessibility, We have web applications across the state of Missouri, and I've caught some that did not create a tagged PDF, and we needed to explore the most accessible solutions and explored that, found what people were using in different agencies, and we were able to make some adjustments and get a good tagged PDF document, which we'll be getting into here shortly. Optimize that and make that accessible for people. So on the development side, when it's auto-generated, auto-created, that has to be considered. Now, the one that you will most likely be utilizing is pulling from a application like Word and converting to PDF. That would probably be one of the most common formats that you're going to see a conversion, but it could be Google Docs, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint if you're trying to share some slide decks, things like that. Adobe InDesign, which is like a kind of, it's a desktop publishing design tool. You can output PDF through that. And the other one to consider is a scanned document. And there may be a host of reasons why you may receive a scanned document, or you have a scanned document that you need to do something with, and what you need to consider if you want to share that and post that out on the web. More times than not, if you have a scanned document, it's always good to double check that you can get a good source document that you can already apply easy accessibility to, because you have to go through several extra steps with a scanned document to convert it to text and to make it a readable tag document. But there are cases where this is all you have, and so you just have to think about that. So what do I need to be thinking about these three that we were just talking about? What do I need to be thinking about as far as how accessible and how much work might these three situations need? And as I mentioned, an auto-generated PDF document that comes from some automated process, the developers need to consider accessibility and either develop or purchase a built-in converter. And they do exist out there. There are accessible converters that can be built straight into web applications. PDFs converted from MS Word. This is where typically you can do most of your accessibility heavy lifting in the source document. If you've built it into that source document, say in Word, which I mentioned that other presentation that was done by Eileen previously, feel free to go take a peek at that. They go over what are all the things that I need to be thinking about to make this convert well to PDF. In this situation, little or no remediation may be needed. So that's good news. A scanned document, if this is all you have, it will need to be OCR, or optical character recognition, and tagging applied to that document. And you can do that, straight from your scanner and have it OCR scan it. You can, and as well as you can do and initiate the OCR process straight from Adobe Acrobat. So you have options, and you do the OCR and you apply tagging. And typically with documents like this, these are the type that you would really need to do probably some remediation, because when a scanned document is converted to text, there's a lot of guesswork that Adobe Acrobat is doing in order to tag it properly. So remediating, there's going to be a fair amount of remediation that may have to happen with a scanned document. But again, getting a good accessible source document that has good structure built into it and best practice with accessibility, your PDF document, once you get to that point, is not going to need a lot of work. So I mentioned about the do's and don'ts. So at the moment that you're ready to convert a document from Office to PDF, there's right ways to do it and a way to not do it. So with the don't, you would not want to use the file print option where you have a Microsoft print to PDF option. That by default will not add the tagging that I was referring to and set up good structure in that document. So, and again, you know, some of these automated tools and web applications, they don't apply tagging, and that's where they have to work to improve that. There's a couple of ways that you can do it, and simply doing a file save as, and then you see a save as Adobe PDF option in your file save as option versus not using the file print. And if you have Adobe Acrobat on your machine, you will automatically get an Acrobat tab in your source application. So you have a couple of different ways you can do it. You can do Acrobat and then create PDF and then follow through the steps. And typically your default settings in that process should do you good as far as converting it. So a big no to file print to PDF. Okay, so now we are going to just do some high level introductory before we actually hop into the tool about what exactly is a tag whenever you're creating a PDF, and you know, what is this and how does it help assistive technology to access the document. So assistive technology, the tag is what assistive technology uses in order to read content in a structured, meaningful way. So for example, heading tags wrapped around headings where you have headings that break up your content. Images are wrapped in a figure tag and alternative text is applied to it. So if you know a little bit about HTML and how, you know, web browsers render web pages, PDF tags are very similar to HTML tags. And in fact, several of the tags are the same. Some of them are not quite the same, but many of them are exactly the same. So something kind of interesting about that. So just like HTML tags allow a browser to understand what a web page is, you know, PDF tags allow assistive technology to read the tags and structure the information and understand what they're reading. So we'll be going in and looking at an actual tag tree, but I was going to give you a couple of examples of a tag tree where you're not seeing a lot of structure, and then a tag tree where you're seeing signs of structure. So on the left side, we have an overarching tag called SECT or section, and typically like one page of a PDF document is wrapped in a section tag. And that's not read out loud, but it's just a wrapper for the whole tag, for that whole page's tag tree. Regular body text will be wrapped in P or paragraph tags. So, you know, off on the right example, you'll see paragraph tags where we have just bodies of text in there. But you'll notice on the left side, you're not really seeing any of the structure that I was talking about earlier. So here on the left side is an example of a document that really didn't have any structure applied to the source document. And on to the right, you're seeing tags like H1 for heading 1 and L for a bulleted list. And then underneath that an LI. And if I were to expand this, I would actually start seeing the actual text in the document. H2, H3, there's different levels of headings based on, you know, H1 is your main and the sizes kind of go down. So this kind of gives you a quick view of this is this is what a structured tag tree looks like. This is one that doesn't have any structure applied. So let's just discuss real quickly, what are some common tags you're going to see in the tag tree? Like I said, paragraph tag, which is where you're going to see, all of your, body and paragraph text. Headings, H1, H2, H3, those different levels that kind of break it up. And again, those are going to be set in the source document. Lists, and this would be bulleted lists. Links are wrapped in a link tag, and data tables are wrapped in a table tag with appropriate, table. There's other table tags underneath that. Figure for images, charts, graphics, logos, and the like. And I'll touch a little bit on artifacts. Artifacts are items in the page that by design and by the way that they're tagged are going to be ignored by an assistive text, such as a screen reader, or potentially ignored by a keyboard. These things would be like a draft, a draft watermark or some sort of watermark in the background. That'll be ignored. Repeated page headers and footers in a Word document. Those by default, you don't have to do anything. It will artifact it. Now, when you get into the next session, you have the ability to go into your tag tree and artifact things, or into the structure and artifact things if there are other elements in your page that you want to ignore. And likewise, I won't be getting into this, but like you can mark images as decorative that you want ignored. So in a way, that's kind of like, you're ignoring it, you're artifacting it, it's going to ignore it because you may have some item that is just something visual on the page that doesn't provide any information, and you really don't have any reason for an assistive tag to even know that it's there. Reading order, we'll go over this when we get to the exercise demo part. Reading order, the tag order must follow how the content would be read on the page. I'll be getting into what that means and how to correct that, but there may be situations where when you test your reading order, it's not quite in the order that you intended. Most of the time when you have a very straightforward text-based document, your reading order, most likely, it by default, it's going to order in the correct way. When you get more complex documents, like maybe something that comes out of Adobe InDesign, those are the kind of things, and then they're converted to PDF. Those are the kind of things where reading order may need to be adjusted, but there is actually ways to adjust your reading order within those source documents as well. So you can still fix those things in source documents. So, the more basic your document, the more text-based, the more likely that your reading order is going to be correct. If you start adding other elements to the page, that's where reading order may adjust a bit. And you're able to take in that tag tree, and you can literally drag and drop items and get them to read in the correct order, or copy and paste, which I'll be showing that here momentarily. Okay, so we're going to be jumping into Acrobat, and I'm going to just kind of show you the best way to kind of set up Acrobat. And, if you happen to have Acrobat on your machine, feel free to pop it open and take a look at things while you're doing this, or play around with these things later on. And then we'll be pulling open a document, looking at a tag tree, talking about reading order and so on. I thought I would go ahead at this moment and take an opportunity to see if there's any questions in the chat before we start the next. Okay. And
I'm not seeing
we
any.
will make those slides available. So definitely. Okay. I'll wait a minute to see if anybody pops anything in there. We'll just take a little quick break. And meanwhile, I'm going to hop over to my PDF document. And get over here. Okay, looks like at this point we don't have any questions. So the first part of this is kind of thinking about how to set up Acrobat to kind of optimize it for if you do need to do some remediating and you do need to run an accessibility check on a document, you know, here's some things to consider in just getting Adobe Acrobat Pro set up. So over on the left side, and I've just got a little demo exercise document open right now, but over on the left side, there's a little kind of quick access menu. And we're going to add quick access to C tags. If you right click and go down to tags, you will get this little icon, this little tag icon right here. It will add to your left menu. Another way to get to that is view, the view menu from the top, show hide, and let's see. Hold on. Oh wait, navigation panes and then tags. And you'll see here, it is, so you got a couple of different ways to get there. So you saw that screenshot earlier of what a tag tree looks like with where it expands and contracts out. And you'll notice here that you're seeing some structure in this document that we saw earlier, where you're seeing heading 1 tags, H1s, and I'm just going to go down the list and kind of take a look at this and show you a list tag with list items. And you'll notice that as I click tags, it will highlight it within the document. And to make sure that it does this highlighting, because it makes it easier to kind of take a peek at a document, there is in your tags menu, there's a little drop down. And if you click that, there's a highlight content option. You want to make sure that's checked, and it will highlight as you highlight things in the tag tree. It will like corresponding, and it'll highlight it in the document itself. So we have, and I'm just scrolling down and it's showing different list items. And again, this is, minus one thing that I'm going to be adjusting in here, maybe a couple things. This document, I've actually applied accessible practices to it in my source document. So you're seeing that structure straight in the document. Here's a figure tag, and I have that highlighted there, some examples of some different things. Here's a table tag. We've got, these are different elements of this table. And you'll see here how it highlights it. And then these are all the details of And this was all created and rendered as it was converted to PDF. All right. So let's see. One of the things that I wanted to show you here while we were taking a peek at this is reading order. And you can literally kind of test out your reading order by starting at the top tag and arrowing down, and you'll see, this is what the reading order will do for a screen reader. You're seeing it. Now, I actually put something I want to adjust in here, so I want to show you. Sorry about that. I thought I had my. All right. We have, so I'm highlighting here, and then, whoops. Now, I don't know if you paid attention, but it actually skipped over some information when I was going through here. And if I go again, it goes back up. Now, in a normal situation, most likely this reading order in a basic document like this would be perfectly fine and you're good to go. Let me turn off. Okay, there we go. So how would we fix something like this? Can you fix things like this in PDF? Yes, you can. You can literally copy and paste, but I'm going to give you an example of, you can do copy paste, you can highlight, and you have the ability in the tag tree to actually just do clicks and drags. And it's not going to physically move the information on the page, it's going to adjust the reading order. So we're going to do, and actually, let me go back up here. And I basically just clicked and dragged, and I have that closed. Sorry about that. I go down. And let's see here. All right, so and here we go. You'll notice now that the reading order is in the correct order. So there we go. And you can do that pretty easily. And again, you can also do this with a cut and paste. You can do cut and you can do paste, etc. So, all right. So next, we're going to get into, now there's over on the right side, there is a menu over on the right side, and we can add things to that we can use, things that you use frequently. So what we're going to get into is there is a tools option up in the upper left. And we're going to be adding some items, and you'll likely notice in session 2 that you'll probably see Kevin hop into some of these tools, but we're also going to do some accessibility. We're going to do an accessibility check on this document as well, and we're going to be adding that to the menu to the right. So some of the things that we're going to be adding here is, all right, we're going to scroll back up. We're on the tools menu again, and we're going to add edit PDF. Edit PDF gives you the ability to, you can literally do small edits, text edits to your document. You can add, links to your document. You can do do modifications to the document, not major text modifications. You're going to want to do those kind of things in your source document. But it does give you the ability to do some basic editing, adding links, etc. Scan and OCR was what I mentioned earlier, where you can pull in a document that is just like a graphic, for example, and you need to convert that text into characters, into text. So you can use that feature in order to do that. You can also literally, like, access your scanner if you're hooked to a scanner and scan something and automatically pull it into PDF. So those options are there as well. Some of you out there probably create forms in Adobe Acrobat, and you would want to prepare forms to put, form fields on a form, for example, etc. So we're basically just adding these things to make them quickly able to launch them from the side menu. And last but not least, under Protect and Standardize, we're going to add the accessibility. And you can resort these whatever way you want, but now we've added these different things to your side menu. So we're going to go back to this document, and we'll expand this back out. And I don't know why that keeps popping up. Okay, so now we're going to talk about using, I want to touch on the accessibility tool. So let's say you do have a document where you're thinking you do want to check accessibility in it. There may be some things that you want to review, or maybe you do want to just confirm, hey, I did everything right in my source document and I'm good to go. So I click that and then I'm expanding it. And if you want to do basically kind of like a basic check on it, you're going to click accessibility check. I find myself typically leave the defaults here, and you'll see this category area here. And the two that I typically use is document, and the document category and the forms category. And probably the most common one would be the document. And that basically is, if you have a document that's mostly just text-based, maybe with a few images and things like that, you can leave that category defaulted. If you're checking accessibility on a form, go ahead and default the category to forms, tables, and lists. But we're going to leave it at document. And then we're going to do the start checking. The check will, by default, will populate over here on the left, and you'll see a new little icon over on the left sidebar menu over here. And you're going to see just a various categories of things that it went through and checked. And for some of these, it may not have even found any of these features in it. So it didn't even, it scanned it, there's no form fields. Typically, I'm going to do this, but by default, whenever you go in here and one of the headings is bolded, that will indicate that there's something underneath that you need to, put your attention to. There's something under there that it found. Also, it doesn't, there are a couple of items under document that are manual. And it's just reminding you, hey, you may want to check these things. And we already talked about logical reading order and how you can check that. And it's a manual process. I'm not going to dive too much into color contrast, but that would also be a manual check. And there are guidelines for having a sufficient amount of contrast in anything that's graphical that's part of your document. And it needs to hit certain thresholds for text, foreground and background, and all of that. So that would be something that this tool doesn't have the ability to check. One of the things in this particular document I've noticed with, it's like a glitch between Word and Acrobat, where you have, a lot of times you'll come in and the title will say that it's failing, even though you put a title property in your Word document. And if you see a fail on your title, you're just going to, normally what you would see here is you would see it'll right here, it'll say fix, and you'll click fix, and it will bring up, like, you know, if it can detect that you set the title, it will just automatically fix it. If it detects that no title was set, it will prompt you to give the document a title. And when I mean title, under File, Properties, it's referring to this title attribute right here. And you can set that in your title property in the source document in Word. So, and then this also gives you an opportunity to, you may not want your author information in there, so you can adjust that out of there and delete it. So there's an example. But just going down here and taking a look, if you had some images in there that were missing alternative text, it would flag them here appropriately. And for example, alternative text can be fixed straight in Adobe Acrobat. So that's a nice thing. Some things can be fixed here. Some things can be potentially adjusted in the tag tree. Let's look here. Tag. Just kind of looking through it. The item, yeah, and I wanted to highlight this headings area here. So earlier, whenever I had the headings out of order, I had a heading 3 before a heading 2, and had I not fixed that, it would have flagged as a fail right here. And then I could have jumped right over to my tag tree and adjusted the, when this was here, when the H3 was first and the H2, I would have fixed it. And then I could have gone back. And another thing I wanted to mention here is the drop down. And you can rerun an accessibility report by hitting the accessibility checker drop down and hitting check again. And if you fix things, it will clear them out of the list. So kind of a nice little feature there. So again, if you had things in here where the tables weren't marked up with table headings properly, it would flag those kind of things. If there was something, if it detected a set of bulleted, like a bulleted list, but it wasn't tagged properly, it would indicate that here. And some of those fixes, this is what Kevin will be getting into in the next session, but just kind of getting you accustomed to what this checker looks like and what potential issues you may come across. Again, I talked about the scanned document. And if you were to open a scanned document that had no text in it whatsoever, it would fail the tag. And if it was an image only, it would fail here as well. And you would know that you need to do your OCR on this particular document and then rerun your test. Or if you have the ability to get hold of an electronic version of that document, that's your best bet. Typically, if your document is not tagged or tagged, it's going to fail on probably a lot of these other things. And so you know, when you don't have a tag document, that's kind of where your starting place is. You're either going to have to manually, there's a feature in here where you can auto tag it, and I'll go ahead and just show you where that is. But you can auto tag a document and then go through remediation. You can auto tag it and then run your check and then see where the issues might be. So this is some of your, some of the things that you'll be doing in order to, some of those beginning steps in order to remediate. To, if you don't have a good source document that you can get tagged, this is where you're going to be stepping into Adobe Acrobat, and you're going to be doing that remediation right directly in this tool. So that kind of gives you an overview. These are all the things that it does have the ability to check with the checker, checking for images, checking that form fields are labeled properly, and obviously checking for basic things like, is this even tagged? Does it have, if it has headings, are they appropriately 1, 2, 3? It's checking lists are properly formatted, tables are properly formatted, and so on. So that is kind of like the intro that will be moving you into session 2 for next month, just getting your feet wet on what a basic document's accessibility report would look like in here. And another thing I wanted to show too, since we're in here, we'll just do a little bit of light editing. I thought I would go through, and here's an example where I hit a P tag, and you notice it's just hitting a blank space. You know, for all purposes, you could go through, and I'm going to just quickly show you how you can delete a tag. And it's not, it's just removing that tag from the tag tree. It's not, adjusting anything critical in your document. It's just removing some things behind the scenes. But removing a tag that's not needed is as simple as hitting delete. You even do have a feature here of deleting empty tags, and that's a great way to just kind of go through and do some cleanup across your document. So I think at this point, that about wraps it up, and we have a little bit of time for some questions if there are any out there. We
Thanks,
will.
Lainey. We also
Yep.
have a poll. We have a 1 question poll that we'll
Okay.
run. So
Excellent.
let's go ahead. If that's okay with you, let's do the poll first, and that'll give everyone a chance to type their questions in. Oh, I guess I can't because we're sharing our account. So it will be something you'll type your response in the chat box. The question basically is, what is it that you're using this training for? Are you going to use it to create policies for where you work? Are you going to be using it for training purposes where you work or other? Or is it still not yet defined? So those would be your 3 choices. If you could type that in the chat box.
And I was going to say, Eileen, if you need to take over share, I don't know if that's what'll fix doing your little thing there.
Oh, thanks. No, I think it's okay. We'll go ahead.
Okay.
Yep, and then I'll let you go ahead and proceed with. So
and
you have a couple questions.
I can look at questions.
Yep.
Okay. Please clarify. Okay, if I don't have Adobe Acrobat, then the accessibility is not fully developed. Not necessarily. I will mention there is an accessibility checker in tools like Microsoft Word. And if you want to take an opportunity to look at Eileen's webinar, she did the recorded one back from December, it will touch on that, because you can go in and do a little bit of accessibility checking there. I wouldn't say it's as robust necessarily as the one here, but it does a pretty good job. Now, as I mentioned, if you were to, follow the best practice rules of setting up a well-formatted, accessible, let's say Word document, Excel document, hold on just a minute here. If you, as I mentioned here, I'm gonna actually refer to one of our pages here. I mentioned here, if you create a well-formatted source document, your accessibility is going to be either fully or mostly there. Because if you do your best practice in your source document and bake it in, then you're going to be pretty good. If I kind of think of it this way, if you have some PDF documents that are more complex, if maybe you're someone that is a designer that works in InDesign, obviously, if you create Adobe Acrobat forms, you would need the Adobe Acrobat tool to even produce a PDF form. So by nature, you would have that tool. So keeping that in mind, if you run the accessibility checker in a tool, say like Microsoft Word, and I have dabbled around with this a little bit, but Google Docs has an accessibility. It's an add-on, but and I'll even pop this in for those of you that use things like Google Docs. There's an accessibility feature called Grackle in Google Docs. So that gives you the ability to create accessible documents out of that platform as well. So I wanted to go ahead and mention that. So hopefully that kind of answers it. If you're doing a little bit more complex stuff, it's well worth your time to get Adobe Acrobat Pro. If you're doing more basic stuff where you're able to apply everything in the source document, then you may not be at a point where you totally need Adobe Acrobat Pro, and maybe down the line you would consider getting it. All right.
Lainey, I see a question from Claudia. She says, I opened up one of the PDFs and did an accessibility check. I don't see the tag icon under accessibility.
Okay. Okay, so let me go back. All right. Now the tag tree is actually a separate thing that you would set up from the menu over on the right. Hold on just a second. And let me know, I'm going to run through this again. So, and I want to make sure you may not be seeing what I was showing you on the left side. Let me know if you see a little arrow on the left side that allows you to expand that out. And then in that little bar, you want to right click and select the tags. And then that will give you the ability to display those tags over on the left side. Claudia, let me know if you have any success with that.
Claudia typed in, got it.
Yay, okay. All right, oops, sorry about that. Thanks for people that put some comments in there.
I'm interested in knowing how many of you do use Google Docs for creating things that end up on the website. If you can put that in the chat box if you're using Google Docs.
But there is some work on that side of things to get things accessible. So that's nice to know that there is that feature that you can add into your, I don't recall if it goes across all their products or whether it's Google Docs specifically. It may very well go across their suite of products, but just if you were to Google Grackle, you'll be able to pull that up and you can incorporate that in, and that really will help leverage getting your documents in that environment accessible. So.
And if you want, check on our YouTube channel under the ICT playlist, because we do have a session. It's actually not titled Google Docs. It's under the accessible classroom material, but there's a section in there at the beginning that covers how to create an accessible Google Doc. If you haven't seen that, it will be worth your time. It'll give you the basic foundation like Lainey was referring to. If you create your source document with building in accessibility, it makes it easier to turn it into an accessible PDF.
And if you go back up to the top of the chat, there's a link there for